And I'll say, I mean, I know a lot of people have different experiences as pastors' kids. They're not always positive, but mine was great. I tell people all the time that basically what I took away from that experience as a kid, all I knew is that I had all these other adults in my life who cared about me. And that was pretty awesome. So I really was blessed by that. It was a wonderful place to not just grow up, but to grow in the Lord.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast, where we true the verse of Genesis 3:16, and we discover that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast. I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming, Executive Director of the Tru316 Foundation. Our website is Tru316.com. That's Tru316.com. And we have an interview today with, well, Joy and I go to this pastor's church. So this is our own pastor, Reverend Jay Pound. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Bruce.
Welcome aboard. As
Thank
of
you.
January 1st, Jay is our senior pastor. He's been with us in our church since 2012 as our associate pastor. Let me say a little bit about Jay. We know his wife. Heidi grew up at our church, and now his two children, Liesel and Evelyn, are growing up there. And Jay went to Bethel University, where he got his BA in Communication Studies and his MDiv from Bethel Seminary. For fun, he enjoys jogging and biking, especially when there's not so much snow on the ground up here in Minnesota. He's an avid reader and watcher of sports, especially my favorite team, too, the Ohio State Buckeyes, because we both grew up in Ohio. And he also likes soccer. My wife and I love to take long walks and play tennis. I enjoy taking my girls to the park or just playing together around the house. That's what he has on the website. So his church is First Evangelical Free Church of Minneapolis. His favorite scripture passage is Ephesians 4:4-6. There's one body, one spirit, just as you were called into one, and the same hope when you were called. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God who is Father of all, over all, through all, and within all. So welcome, Jay, to the Eden Podcast.
Thanks.
We
It's overdue, but I refuse to come on until the Buckeyes won a national championship. So here we are. Timing's perfect.
Oh, did they win? Oh,
They
yeah.
did, yeah. Your favorite team, Bruce.
That's right. Yeah, we were both rooting for them.
That's right.
And it's a shame all the others had to lose, but it was really good that ours got to win. So, yeah. When I grew up, I had a dog. My dad says, "What are you going to name it?" And I named him Woody because Woody was the coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes at the time, Woody Hayes.
Yeah,
So that's how much football influenced the people growing up in Ohio.
that's right.
Please forgive us, everybody else, but we
Yeah.
like that. So, Jay, you're in the ministry. You're our pastor. We want to know how you got there. We have three questions we like to ask on the Eden Podcast. The first one is, tell us your faith story. How did you come to Christ and start to grow in Him?
Yeah, well, I'll start sort of all the way at the beginning. So I grew up in a Christian household. My parents, my dad was a senior pastor at a church in Mansfield, Ohio called Berean Baptist. I grew up there. He was there for over 30 years. It's the only church I ever attended as a kid. I was dedicated as a baby with the first building they built. So I have a deep and long connection there. And I'll say, I mean, I know a lot of people have different experiences as pastors' kids. They're not always positive, but mine was great. I tell people all the time that basically what I took away from that experience as a kid, all I knew is that I had all these other adults in my life who cared about me. And that was pretty awesome. So I really was blessed by that. It was a wonderful place to not just grow up, but to grow in the Lord. And I would say I accepted the Lord when I was very young. And maybe the first big milestone came, it actually came when I was in sixth grade. My buddies and I were trying to sneak into youth group early. You know, it's hard to know what you're thinking. I mean, I'm the senior pastor's kid, and we thought if we just didn't go to our class and snuck into this other class, maybe no one would notice. But of course they did. And so the one week, the youth pastor just grabbed my buddies and I, and he said, "Hey, I know you're eager to be part of youth group." And he said, "But, you know, I think the question you guys need to ask yourself right now, that's going to come, do you have a faith of your own, or are you just here because your parents bring you?" And I remember being a little upset by that. I didn't like the implication there. And but he was a youth pastor. He knew what he was doing. I went home and thought, I'm going to show him. I'm going to have my own relationship. But it really was true that I think that was probably the first time that I really started to think about what it meant for me to have a relationship with God, like I had relationships with friends or family or things like that. And so, I went home and that week I told my parents I'd like to get a devotional. They, of course, were happy to provide that. But that really was the first big step on that journey where I understood, not just that God existed and that he was important and he had done these wonderful things, including for me, but that he actually wanted to relate to me. And so I started taking steps at that point where I thought, okay, I got to feel my way into this. Prayer isn't just, a way of dropping off petitions somewhere, but it's an actual conversation with a person who wants to know me and be known by me. And so, I can't say that it was anything super deep or profound at that time, but I still look back to that as a significant moment where I really started to understand, or at least think about what it meant to be in relationship with God. That sort of carried on then through my youth group years. Those were years of significant growth in a number of ways. I'll just shout out, one person who had a big impact on me was that when I made it to junior high youth group at the time, our junior high youth group met on Monday and senior high met on Wednesday. And senior high students could be volunteers to help with junior high ministry. Mm. And so we didn't have like ongoing small groups. We just kind of broke up into groups. But there was a senior high guy that kind of took my buddies and I under his wing, and his name was Shane Convis. And Shane, I think, was probably 17 when we were in 7th grade. And we, of course, just thought he's the coolest guy we'd ever met, and he was awesome. And mostly because, I think they still say this in youth ministry, in junior high, you're cool if you want to hang out with me, but in senior high, the kids start asking, well, do I think you're cool? So, here we were, he wanted to hang out with us, and we just thought, man, he can drive. He was introducing us to some really cool music. He just seemed like an awesome guy. He was. And, I can't, it's funny, I can't tell you specifically anything he said over those years, but it was his presence, his willingness to give his time and his life to us. I mean, some of the coolest stuff to me, I remember him on multiple occasions. He'd call up my buddies and I and say, hey, my friends and I are hanging out watching a movie tonight. Would you guys want to come?
Oh, yeah.
This is the greatest thing, oh, yeah, so. And in hindsight, it is a remarkable thing. I mean, here's this juniors and seniors who welcomed in these squirrely, junior high guys, and we're just happy to let us hang out with them. And we just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know, there's always a lot of things that feed into why we become who we are. But to me, I still think of that had a massive impact on my life. First and foremost was I knew, like, as soon as I'm able, I want to do what he does. So I knew I wanted to, when I was in senior high, I was going to be helping out in junior high as well.
Yeah.
And I just learned the significance of, giving yourself and your time to people that we, especially, in ministry, we spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time worrying over wording and things like this. And maybe some of that has an impact on people, to be sure, but a lot of it is just personal presence. And I learned that from him. And so, he, I think, in a big way, helped me see the potential, even for students, like, here's the 17-year-old having a huge impact on my life. And I thought, man, I could do that for other kids. And so I did that. I helped out with junior high ministry all through high school. When I came to Bethel for college, I found a church where I could get plugged in, helping out with the junior high ministry there. Had a wonderful experience. Calvary Baptist with Ralph Gustafson,
Mhm.
who also had a big impact on my life. So that I see that as kind of a big milestone. I went to college not really thinking I was going to go into ministry. And I'll say it's partly a selfish thing. I saw my dad's experience, and it was a great experience. That was a wonderful church. But I also saw that other people's parents, when they weren't at work, they didn't work. And I knew he was getting calls and going to the hospital and going back in the
Yeah.
evening for meetings with deacons and things. And I just thought, I don't know if that's what I want. And so I
Mhm.
came to college unsure what I wanted to do, but not thinking I wanted to go into ministry. And
So,
so
so
then,
while you were doing all that,
yeah,
Heidi was growing up at First Free Church, and
she was.
So was our Christy. And
Yes.
Glenn and
Yeah.
April, and Joy and I
Yeah.
were in the same adult
Yeah.
group together, fellowshipping, and so we had a big influence. I mean, a big emphasis on youth ministry.
Hmm.
So, are you stressing youth ministry at your church now?
Oh yeah, we are absolutely. I mean, that's I mean, we stress whole family ministry. I mean, we want this to be a place where we're in partnership with parents. We will say we just hired a new youth pastor who's a great guy named Jake, and I think one of the big things we were looking for in candidates is we wanted to find someone who didn't need to be prompted, but who we could just tell it just overflowed out of them that
Yeah.
they believed that youth ministry could have a significant impact on the whole life of a person. And Jake that's his personal testimony. He came to faith through youth ministry, and
Mm.
so I mean, he believes to his core that can transform the lives of students. And so, that's that's something you like to see in a youth pastor.
So the neat thing about it at our church, we've got all generations. They're all
Yeah.
bumping into each other. Yeah. Let's shift to question number two, and that would be
Yeah.
what is your ministry story?
Yeah. So I'll pick it up in college. So, you know, I was involved in a bunch of things at Bethel. I had a wonderful time there. But junior year, I ended up on a study abroad trip to Europe. And it was a wonderful trip. It had a big impact on me, and it was just a blast, honestly. But I'll try to explain it. It's sort of a strange and wonderful experience. But it was this group of about 20 students. We were kind of based in Austria, but we traveled around. We were in France, we were in the Czech Republic, and in Italy, some too for free travel. But it was really neat. We had a variety of in a number of ways. We had people from all over the map, just different personalities. We had people with just, I mean, it's all within a narrow range, but with different sort of religious convictions, different beliefs about spiritual practices, and just all the challenges that you have with any group that's spending almost all their time together, day in and day out, for 3.5 months. But what was really cool to see is just how that group came, despite some of these differences, to really care for one another on a deep and significant way. We just got together recently. I mean, it's been 20 years, as we kind of did it as a 20-year reunion just for this trip. And
Oh,
it was wonderful. No one wanted to leave. We were just there for hours, just reconnecting, talking with each other. And I received my call to ministry in that context while I'm on that trip, partly through we read together Bonhoeffer's book, Life and Community. We read a book. It was really just a collection of speeches by Jean Vanier, From Brokenness to Community, and I received a specific call really in the midst of a conversation. We were already at a point, we were later in the trip, where I had been I was realizing what a special thing it was to be part of this group, even while we were still there. And really, what God said to me is, this is what I'm doing. I am calling people across all these different boundaries and divisions, and I'm reconciling them in one family in Christ. And I really felt a call, not just to ministry, but specifically to his church. and that I felt like I had this experience of powerful Christian community where I saw what was possible, and I saw a chance for reconciliation, for healing across, and again, if you're depending on your background, you might think some of the divisions on a Bethel trip are not significant. But what is it? The narcissism of small differences, or something like that. They feel big, and it was just really a powerful experience to me. And I sort of came out of that thinking like, yeah, this is something I would like to give my life to, as being a servant of that church, and of seeing that kind of reconciliation and unity built across divisions that our culture and our society thinks are significant, and in some cases maybe unbridgeable. I love to see people come together under the banner of Christ.
So that was like a shepherding kind of a call. I mean, the relationships you were building. So when you got home, did you tell your mom and dad, say, "Hey, guess what happened"?
Yeah, I did. And it, in a way that's almost funny in hindsight. My big worry at the time was, when I got home, the trip really had given me enough credits that I met the major for communication. Although I really went on the trip just because I wanted to go on the trip, and so then I'm kind of scrambling, and I'm talking to my dad, and trying to figure out, like, man, do I need to figure out how I can switch to a Bible theology major? And, how am I going to do that? Is it going to mean another year in undergrad?
As part of your college degree, yeah.
Yeah. And my dad said, no, God, I mean, two things. One, he said, God called you in this context. I think you can trust he knows what he's doing. And he said, two, at that point, I knew my next step was seminary. I mean, I wanted to go to seminary already. I came home wanting that. And he said, you'll get Bible and theology there. It's not a bad thing to also spend some time thinking about how to communicate it.
So when one Sunday morning, Joy and I walked into church, and you introduced the speaker, and it was a professor from Bethel.
Yeah.
Who would that have been?
That was Janine Brown, one of my. I will say I don't think I had, forget a bad, even a mediocre professor at Bethel Sem. They were all excellent. I loved my time there, and I just, it's a cool thing to at that point finally to have a clear notion of where I wanted to go, and to want that preparation, and then to get it from people, that training and equipping from people who are brilliant, and not just brilliant, but people who care deeply. I mean, they're giving their lives to build the church too. So, but one of my favorites, I was in Sem PM, and so they don't have that program anymore, I don't think. But they stacked a bunch of classes Monday evening. You were just there for a long time, but I think the first class I had Janine for was it was like a 2-hour block on Monday night. So, most of us have already worked 8 hours. We've sat through a 2-hour class, or hour and a half, something like that. Mm-hmm. And Janine was just, I mean, charismatic. She would talk to us about the New Testament, Gospel of Matthew, Philippians, and it just, we're all almost battling to stay awake, and all of a sudden you just find yourself, I mean, riveted. And she was a great teacher. She also, at a very key point, I was trying to figure out, I really loved teaching. At that point, I'd been volunteering in our church. I'd been leading an adult class, and I found I had a love for teaching. So I was kind of wrestling with, maybe my role, and serving the church is going to be in a teaching capacity, kind of like you're doing. And she gave me wonderful advice that has turned out to be significant, which was that she said, hey, I'll just tell you, as a professor, I have never regretted sort of the pastoral care component of an MDiv. And she said, even if you end up a professor, if you're going to be a good one, you're going to try and care and help your students, not just academically, but spiritually. And none of this will be a waste of time. And so that's one of those things where the minute I heard it, I just knew it was right. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful for that now, because just of how things have worked out. That's turned out to be maybe the more important part of my education. So that's been neat.
So Dr. Janine Brown was the first keynote speaker at the 316 Day celebration for us a couple
Yeah.
of years
Yeah.
ago. And so I think she's still on the NIV update committee. So does a
Yeah, I think so.
lot of good work there. And then through her, we met another one of your professors. Well, you would know him, Dr. Mark Strauss.
Yeah. Hmm.
He's also on the NIV committee, and both of them then came back and we've interviewed them for the Eden podcast.
Yeah.
So we've had a good time with both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. They're great. Yeah. And Janine, I mean, I will say it's not a promo for Bethel, but one thing that when you're there, you don't necessarily appreciate, but they really do have an ethos where they want to help the church. And so Janine was good enough. I mean, I can't even remember. I think I must have been an associate pastor by then, but I invited her back just to teach. I think 3 weeks we called them electives, where we just brought in a sort of a special guest speaker, and she was good enough to do that for us a couple times. She did that once for us on Philippians, I think once on Matthew, and then she shared in the service one week as well. So I mean, I don't know. She's on the NIV board. She's writing books. She's a
Yeah.
professor. She's got plenty of stuff that makes a claim on her time, and she's been good enough to bless our church multiple times. So we're grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. Um, you touched me. So the third question we normally ask people is, if they have one, is
Yeah.
what's your Tru316 story? And a couple weeks ago, you reached out to Joy and me, and you said you were in a prayer meeting, and the Lord put the Tru316 Foundation on your heart, and you were asking how we're doing. So what's your
Yeah.
Tru316 story?
Yeah, I thought a little bit about that in connection for this, and I was trying to think exactly when. I'll just say I grew up probably with a sort of generic, I guess I would call it sort of now a soft hierarchicalism notion. I mean, really sort of an old-fashioned American notion about marriage roles, and that, in hindsight, it's hard to figure out. I think because of that, I read some of that into scripture rather than the other way around. That's just sort of although, it's funny now to me in hindsight too. My dad couldn't have ordered or designed a better partner in ministry than my mom, who all throughout her time at the church was constantly was leading Bible studies, speaking at special events. Again, both my parents, I'm grateful. I know this isn't everyone's experience. It's a pastor's kid, but my mom, my whole life, I would wake up and she's at the dining room table doing her devotions, praying. I mean, she was a great example to me, not just of faithfulness, but of ministry, of someone who gave her life serving the church. And so that didn't, you don't think about it, it's just reality growing up. But I think I'll credit Gary Long probably at Bethel. My junior year, I had a class with him, a mandatory Bible class. He was great. I really enjoyed him as a professor. He was just a fun guy. But he did a really good job, I think, not trying to push people to his point of view either, but just helping us. It was an exegesis class, so it was trying to teach us how to do exegesis and to say, hey, rather than thinking you already know what's there before you get there, or reading your own ideas into there, just and it's funny. I have great appreciation now, because it's harder than we all think it is to learn to just say, hey, to really work to try and ask, what is this text actually saying? And so I think he did a great job of, and he used sort of the women's roles and women in ministry as one sort of example where, we would go to certain texts that everyone thought made it really clear that, women weren't to have a role in ministry. But then, we'd be in the same book and we'd go to other texts where, Paul is then making comments that just assume that women are, praying publicly, perhaps even leading prayer in the body. And so he was just trying to get us to say, okay, but these are both here, and what are you gonna do with that? And I realized, partly through stuff that came to my mind and stuff other people said, that people are often very quick to decide, well, obviously you have to understand this text in light of this one. And I started, and it was the first time I started thinking, well, why not the other way around? And realizing that the only reason we would assume that is because that was what we already thought was the case. And so I think that really kind of started me on a journey. I mean, I know you and I have talked before. One book that was significant for me later was it's got the very catchy title, Slaves, Women, and Homosexuals, by a guy named Webb, where he uses kind of those three different issues as a way to think about a broader hermeneutic. He calls it a redemptive movement hermeneutic. And I found that particular way of thinking about it to be very persuasive, where he pointed out that, with respect to some issues, there just isn't this, for example, just sexual ethics. There's not a broad range. There aren't these exceptions God is making all over the place. There's just a consistent message all throughout. But then there are issues where God seems to be meeting his people where they're at, but then leading them in a particular direction. And so I thought, that not only seemed right to me in terms of the biblical story, but it just seemed obviously true that that's always what God is doing. He meets all of us individually where we're at, but then with the goal of transforming us. And so that really set me on a path where I started thinking about that very differently and thinking, where not just sort of what is the culture we see that happens to be the case when God calls Abraham, right? Or when the kingdom of Israel is established, yeah. Or what the culture happens to be in the Greco-Roman world when the church starts, but to start asking, what is God? Where is God trying to move his people? And to try and sit with his word and really ask, where is it pointing us? Where is it leading us? And that was a transformational moment. So sorry if you want to follow up on that. I know that was kind of all over the place.
No, I love following you. I have no trouble with that. I have no trouble with that at all. But I do have to bring us to a close. Before we do, you and I have thought about 316 Day, and as a result of what happened when we first had Dr. Janine Brown as our keynote speaker, we have coming up in a couple weeks on March 16, so the third month, 316, on Sunday afternoon, we've been invited down to Orlando to the Campus Crusade for Christ headquarters. And we're going to be honoring Judy Douglass, who is the former First Lady of Campus Crusade, for her lifetime of ministry. And the keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Jennifer Holloran, President of the American Bible Society. So we're thrilled to have some of these wonderful speakers and be involved here. So we're going to miss a Sunday. I hope you'll forgive us. We'll follow on YouTube, Jay. we'll follow your sermon. So we've got good things. Just want to encourage people, if they want to take a look, they can go to Tru316.com, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see a place to reserve. You can come in person. We have a few places left, or you can get the live feed and be involved with us that way. So we're excited about Tru316 Day coming up. Well, Jay, we're appreciating you. We pray for you as our pastor, and we appreciate your praying for us. And thank you so much for your time with us here on the Eden Podcast.
Well, thanks, Bruce. We appreciate you. I appreciate you and your ministry, and I think you guys are doing great work.
Tru316 Foundation is the home of the Eden Podcast. Join us for $3.16 a month or more. Let's true the verses on the key passages on women and men. Go to Tru316.com/partner. Tru316 is strengthening and encouraging many, and we're getting stories every day of lives changed through our ministry. We're the home of the Eden Podcast, and we're getting the word out that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Our volunteer help is wonderful, and we grow stronger with each new Tru partner who gives to the Tru316 Foundation so that we can cover the costs to do the technical work of the Eden Podcast, to coordinate our Tru School workshops like the 2-week Eden workshop on Genesis 2 and 3, and to make the Tru316 Foundation function in its outreach to scholars and students around the world. You can give now with a one-time gift. And better still, you can join now and become a monthly donor. We call our monthly donors our true partners. Please join now by going to Tru316.com/partner.